Hello and welcome to Silent Sundays, a new quasi-regular-ish series, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, where I'll be talking about silent films once again. It's been far too long, I think. Anyone who's followed my channel with any degree of regularity over the past few years will probably remember there was a period there where I was going fucking mental on silent films and talking about them a lot. And so it's time to get back to that, I think. And so this will be a good chance, a good opportunity to talk about some silent films again, and every now and then do a Silent Sunday video, and I'll explain what the meaning behind that is. I mean, it's fairly self-explanatory, but there's a specific reason for it that I'll get to in just a second. But again, it's really interesting. I can kind of chart the beginnings of my passion for silent films. In 2011, I hadn't seen any silent films whatsoever and wasn't really interested in them or even thinking about them. They weren't on my radar whatsoever, and then 2012 came around, and the first 24-hour movie marathon, I think it was, I watched A Trip to the Moon for the first time, which I'd heard of here and there and thought, I'll give this film a watch. It's only 15 minutes long, but that was kind of what it was, just a 15-minute curiosity more than anything else. Not something that you're committing to sit down for a full feature-length silent film. And then it was a couple of years after that where I heard about and was getting really intrigued about a film called Metropolis. And it was one of those ones, again, where it's kind of in your head. You're kind of aware of it. Maybe you've seen like a glimpse of kind of the robot from it, and you think, oh, C-3PO, you know. So it's kind of like it's like a kind of second-hand knowledge where you don't really know anything about it, but it's there in your head altogether in some way. And so you just need to kind of look at it and say, okay, what is it? Metropolis, you read up about the synopsis, and then that kind of second-hand knowledge starts to kind of filter out, and you're like, oh yeah, I remember. So, and I got really intrigued about watching this film, so I picked up the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray of it, and this was the one that kind of did it for me with silent cinema. You know, I always say, and it's kind of like a well-worn story or phrase, I guess, where I say that Trip to the Moon was the film that nudged open the door to silent cinema for me, just slightly ajar. And then Metropolis just kicked the door wide open, and then not too long after that, Buster Keaton came along and drop-kicked the door clean off its hinges, and there was no going back and no shutting that door ever again. But Metropolis was the first full one that I watched, and just staggered me, just completely like, wow. And it's crazy because it doesn't feel like that long ago that I first watched Metropolis, and now, you know, I have a collection of like over 100 silent films, and I've seen a lot of them. There's still many that I haven't seen. I'm no expert by any means, but it's something that I'm really passionate about. And in recent years, I've kind of let it fall by the wayside. As you will know if you follow my channel, my kind of attention gets drawn in many different areas, and so I tended to kind of really get into silent films, like as far as like watching a lot of them during my silent movie marathons, actually. So the first one I did in 2014, which was really a blast, and I watched some incredible films, and then the second silent movie marathon, which was batshit crazy, a 9-hour long video that somehow almost got 1,000 views, and people watched it and liked it, and I watched just, I think, dozens of films in that one. And then the third silent movie marathon, which I think was maybe my favorite, just really a lot of things came together nicely with that one. I really liked the skits that I did for that, and also just the selection of films, so that was like a really enjoyable one. And I did start doing Silent Movie Marathon 4 in 2017, and I was so passionate about that idea, and there's like hours of unreleased footage from that, but I just ended up not completing it. And it was going to be a history of silence. I was going to like go to the beginning and then kind of end with modern silent films. Really was excited about that, but it just kind of fell apart for some reason. So maybe at some point I'll go back to that footage and try and salvage some of it and complete it at some point, but I'm not really stressing about that too much for now. You know, I kind of need to get obsessed about it again, and then, you know, that's kind of the way to open it and kind of get back into it and things. But an opportunity presented itself for me to go and see Metropolis in a cinema. And if you followed my channel for many years, you might remember when I was first getting into silent films and talking about them that I was always saying over and over again, I would love to see these films in a cinema. That'd be like a real kind of, you know, films to watch in a cinema bucket list kind of thing, where, you know, there's just something special about seeing a film that old, and a film that is so intriguing to me. That, because for me, watching silent films is not really entirely, at least, about watching the film as far as like just enjoying it for what it is. It's part of it is the intrigue and kind of the wonder of just seeing this thing that was made so long ago. The art form of cinema is so young comparatively to almost anything else, to painting, music, and to see it in its kind of really early stages is so fascinating to me, and especially like the tail end of the silent era, the 1920s, where You know, it really just was hitting its peak before sound came along, and they were pushing the boundaries. Metropolis is one of those films that really pushed the boundaries, and they were being pushed far before Metropolis, but Metropolis just seemed to like bring everything together, like all these kind of special effects that, you know, filmmakers have been working on for kind of decades, really. Go back to Georges Méliès, what he was doing in the late 1800s, early 1900s with the kind of double exposures and all that kind of stuff, but just really refining those special effects and then kind of wrapping them up in this big epic story that, you know, was just so massive, and the scope and the imagination and the craftsmanship of all the sets and everything in Metropolis is really kind of like the zenith, I think, of that kind of big silent movie. You can look at something like Intolerance, which was huge in scale, but I think Metropolis really just refines it down to this kind of amazing, kind of one-of-a-kind movie. Anyway, as I was saying, I get kind of lost when I'm talking about these films. So I've always wanted to see Metropolis in particular in a cinema. And over the years, I've been lucky enough to see a few films, silent films in the cinema. The first one was a Buster Keaton double bill with The Playhouse, a short film, and then Steamboat Bill Jr., which is a wonderful film. And that was at the BFI South Bank. Really, really good. Great, memorable cinema experience. I remember there was an old woman a few rows in front of me who literally said, as the first short film finished, "They don't make them like they used to." And I had to laugh and think, wow, I really just heard someone say that earnestly, you know, but it kind of, you know, it fits. And then leaving afterwards, there was this woman about, you know, maybe in her 30s, and she said, "That was really good." And I kind of felt like, you know, Breakfast Club kind of punching the air, like, yes, like it was just really exciting to hear people seeing those films for the first time and enjoying them, and seeing how Buster's work in particular just completely resonates with an audience almost 100 years after these films have been made. And I think really Buster Keaton's films are really timeless. Like, they're just so easy to digest and kind of have fun with. Metropolis is a little bit different than that, and a lot of silent films are a little bit different than that, and they test your patience a lot more. So Buster Keaton's like a good gateway into that, and so that was a good one to watch in the cinema for the first time. But the second one was diving straight into the deep end when I saw Napoleon at the Watershed Cinema in Bristol. I had to go and see it. I took the trip from Cardiff and got the coach up, and that was the whole day. Like, this is a 5.5 hour long film, and so they had, I think they showed it in 4 parts. I think there was, or maybe 3 intermissions. There was one big lunch break intermission where I went to FOP, I think, or HMV, and bought some films, but, you know, there was a few breaks in between, but you're essentially watching this like 5.5 hour long film, and that was an incredible experience, a draining experience, but you know, it was crazy to me to even think that I would do something like that. And it's crazy now just to think about, you know, again, like I said, going back to when I first started watching these films, and I never would have dreamed that I would get into silent films. They just seemed like, oh, yeah, it's cool what they used to do, but it's a bit boring, you know. Whereas now it's really, I can sit down and watch a 5.5 hour long silent film. But again, the situation needs to be right, and I don't know if I ever would be able to sit down and watch Napoleon. I've got the really nice Blu-ray that the BFI put out, but would I sit down and watch that from start to finish at home? I don't think so, you know. The longest I've watched was the 1915 serial, I think it was 1915, The Vampires, which is over 7 hours. It's technically a TV show before TV was invented, so I think it's 10 episodes, and I watched that in one go, but it did take me maybe 13, 14 hours, like taking breaks in between, you know. So it's really difficult to completely commit to watching a silent film if it's a really long one. But and Metropolis is kind of like the sweet spot, I think. It's like the Metropolis is like 2.5 hours long. It's really, you know, you really have to commit your time to sitting down and watching it, but it's not it's not ridiculous. It's not like 5, 6, 7 hours long like some silent films can get. So those are the only two I think I've seen. Oh no, there was a third one. Last year I went to the same cinema that I saw Metropolis in, which I'll talk about in just a second. They were showing The Golem. So that was, I hadn't seen it before, so I thought, oh great, I'll go and watch it. And there was only a few people that had turned up, you know, so it was a little bit like, I don't know, and then I had a little bit of a drama with one of the people sat behind me who were huffing and puffing because I'd sat down in the middle, and it's like, it's tiered seating. I'm not blocking your view, but this woman made a big show and got up and moved, and I was just like, so it was like uncomfortable energy just permeated that screening thing. It was a little bit disappointing, really. And I was really tired. I'd been at work all day. It was a really bad decision to go and see it. But I really wanted to see, you know, a silent film in a cinema. It's really cool to me because it's like, yeah, you can watch a silent film at home. But, you know, back then in the 1910s, 1920s, the only way they would watch films is in a cinema or projected in some way. You know, it wasn't, you know, TV, watching films at home didn't really exist unless you had like a projector at home and you were very rich. So just seeing these films in a cinema to me is a very special experience. And so my local cinema, not far away, on the pier of all places, the Snowcat cinema, used to be called something else a few years ago. I've been there a few times. I think I made a video once in like 2016 talking about going there, but they've now rebranded, I guess. It's called Snowcat Cinema, and I've been there quite a few times. It's a very nice small cinema, but a nice location on the beach, on the pier. And they've started a new program called Silent Sundays. That's where it all ties in. And I just thought, perfect. I don't work on Sundays, and they're going to show some silent films. So this was the first one, and I was really pleased that it was pretty much packed out, you know. Again, small room, but there was a lot of people there who had turned up to see this film, and so it was unlike the Golem screening, where everyone was into this, or at least they were being very respectful of the silence, because I think the opening of the film is just like text and no music. It's like explaining the restoration of the film and everything, and so you could hear a pin drop. Everyone was like really, you know, if this was in like a Cineworld, there'd be rustling, you know, people just like, you know, whatever. But there was a respect of the silence in this screening, which was really great. And, you know, I've talked about Metropolis before, and I've reviewed it before. In fact, me and Connie did it. That's one of my favorite reviews, I think, because I got Connie to watch the film. And so we've done a review on Metropolis. I'll leave a link to that at the end. I've talked about it before. So I'm not going to be reviewing this film. And that'll be the same going forward, because it'll probably be a lot of films I've already seen. But if they do screen one I haven't seen, then I can review it and give you my thoughts. But really just, I think it's interesting. It's a different experience in the cinema. So I thought this would be a good series to do, just giving you my thoughts on the film after seeing it for a second time and what the experience was like seeing it in a cinema. So I'm all for this Silent Sundays program they're starting, and I'm really excited about the future of it. Hopefully attendance remains strong and it can keep going and going and going, because I really am looking at this like 2020 date as kind of like a resurgence for me personally in getting back into silent films. And with that, I'll have an announcement to make at the very end of this video, so stay tuned for that. Anyway, Metropolis. I'm a big fan of the film. I have like 3 copies of it on Blu-ray. This is the Ultimate Edition Steelbook. And then of course Graham, again, one of the most incredible gifts ever, gave me the recent 90th anniversary edition, which is awesome. But I had, only watched ever the 2010 restoration of Metropolis, which I've talked about before, so you can go kind of see all that. But to cut a long story short, you know, like a quarter of this film had remained missing since 1927. Basically, it was cut up and stuff was removed, and it was really, I think, that Berlin premiere in 1927 where the full Metropolis was shown, and after that it wasn't really retained in its complete essence. And then decades and decades later, I mean, the story is, I'll just recycle the story because it's so great. I forget the particular details of it, but someone was screening Metropolis, and for some reason he had to put his thumb down on the projector while the film was running. And he was complaining to someone saying, oh, it's such a hassle to screen Metropolis, you got to put your thumb down for 2.5 hours. And they were like, well, Metropolis isn't 2.5 hours, you must be getting that detail wrong. So no, I was definitely there for 2.5 hours. And then, you know, rumor and word started to spread, and this print was tracked down. And there's a great documentary on the Blu-ray where you see the kind of historians sitting there refusing to believe that this print even exists, and they're sitting there all skeptical and stuff. And then they sit down, they watch it, and they're like taking notes. They're like, this is like the fucking full, you know, it's almost the entire complete Metropolis. And this discovery in 2008 was huge, and so in 2010 it was kind of, everything was brought together. The new footage is a little bit, you know, damaged and stuff, and they've done the best that they can with it, but it's such an amazing, you know, miracle that this footage has kind of survived even in some kind of battered and beaten up form, and they've managed to kind of integrate it back into the movie and give us pretty much the complete Metropolis again. So seeing that is great, but that's the only version I've ever known. So there's actually a DVD disc on the 90th anniversary set that has the 2001 restoration. I want to watch that. I'm intrigued to see how it plays without the kind of, I don't want to call it interruptions, but without the distractions of the new footage. I love that the new footage is there, don't get me wrong, and I'll always watch that version, but I'm intrigued to see how it plays without that. Unfortunately, it is only DVD, not in high definition, but I've never seen anything, you know, but the 2010 complete, mostly complete restoration. So yeah, that'd be intriguing to go back maybe and see the 2001 cut. I have gone back and watched the Giorgio Moroder version, which is also on these 2 Blu-rays, the Ultimate Editions, and it's an experience. But that, I think that kind of helped kind of keep Metropolis kind of relevant in the 80s. It kind of re-energized not even the discussion, but just people's awareness of it being a movie. I don't know, it just seemed to that seems to be an important point in Metropolis's history. Maybe not the best point for sure, but it's a key part of that film's longevity, was the re-energizing of it in that 1980s version, but which a lot of people kind of grew up on and first experienced the film in that way. But once you've seen the original, it's no, just no. But yeah, the different versions of Metropolis are very interesting. But seeing this 2010 version in the cinema was awesome. I always kind of forget that in this cinema, the Snowcat cinema, you need to really get there early to get a good seat, and I always keep missing out. So I was sat right at the front, which actually was kind of perfect. I don't know, it was like a really... I was in some of the big wide shots of the city. I was really able to just literally look around with my head or my eyes, I suppose. I probably wasn't going like that, but I can literally scan my eyes around and just look at all these details in different parts of the screen that maybe I wouldn't be too aware of at home, you know. So really just taking in a lot of the detail, and it never fails to impress me, the film, because there are points in Metropolis where it lags a little bit. It starts to feel like a little bit of a slog. It is a very long movie, and it is tough when it's a silent film and you're so accustomed, so ingrained in the way that movies are made and shown and experienced, where you have dialogue and music and all this kind of stuff. But one thing Metropolis really has going for it is that it has the original score, which most silent films don't have at all. It is, I forget the guy's name, it's Gottfried Huppertz, maybe. And his original score has been retained, re-recorded, obviously, and it just gives it so much life and power. And I've been really happy to find that the score is on Spotify. So I've been listening to it over and over again the past week or so after the film, and I'm just like, oh, the opening kind of fanfare. A lot of it really rings kind of close to John Williams to me, which obviously would be the other way around, but it just seemed like, I wonder if he was inspired by his work or in some way. I'm not too sure about what this composer had done or what his entire career was like, but there's echoes of what I know to be Star Wars and the big kind of operatic fanfare kind of music, but it's so epic and appropriate. And I think that one of my favorite scenes of the film is when we've been introduced to the workers down below at the bottom of the city of Metropolis. And again, I'm not going to go into the plot. I'm assuming you've seen the film. And then we get introduced to kind of the middle section of Metropolis, which is like the sons of the rich, you know, kind of like running around and kind of frolicking and kind of, you know, entertaining women and leading a very decadent lifestyle. And then we have at the very top in the new Tower of Babel is the master of Metropolis. And so when we first see him, the father of the lead character, the music is just this very bombastic kind of piece that is just, I don't know, it's whenever that piece hits, I remember where I was when I first watched the film, and that piece of music started, the very bombastic kind of like the Master of Metropolis theme, I'll call it. That's when I first thought, fucking hell, this is a movie. Like, this is, it's very overt and blunt with its themes at times, but it's very clearly setting everything up, and the way the music is complementing it, and the way he's pacing around his kind of office and looking out over the city, and the music is, incredible. And there's so much about that scene when his son comes in and he's kind of speaking about what he saw and everything. And there's a big stretch in that scene where there's no intertitles, and all you're seeing is the actor's face conveying it. And there's a lot of intertitles in the film, but I always love it when a silent film can kind of go quite a good stretch without giving any of the speech. You can kind of see it from the way they're acting. The acting was another thing that I really was even more impressed by this time. Seeing it more up close on a big screen was the acting of the four lead characters. So because there's like these four performances that so brilliantly complement each other, I think, because we have like the romance of the film. We have the lead character, Freda, and I forget the actor's name. I think is it Gustav Froehlich or something like that. But we have Freda and we have Maria, Bridget Helm, the kind of the romance of the film, and their performances are very theatrical and kind of at times frantic and kind of very expressive, and then also very slow and methodical and over the top, but again expressive. It's like I go back to that kind of Carl Pilkington quote. It's like a bit of weird art, you know, watching them act and just seeing this runway where he's holding his chest like this very slowly, you know. It's like in one part it's ridiculous, and the other part it's like really earnest and kind of involving and interesting. And then we have Rotwang, the inventor, played by Rudolf Klein Rogge, who is an incredible actor. I mean, I've seen him in a lot of Fritz Lang's films. He just has such a amazing screen presence. And when he first appears in this film, he's very like theatrical again, much like the other actors. He's like, you know, holding his hand up like this, very like over the top. But then as soon as he goes down and he just goes back down to this very like basic human level, just the look in his eyes, he is such a great actor, and I think he would have excelled in, well, I guess he did continue over into the sound era with Dr. Mabuse, the Testament of Dr. Mabuse, but I feel like he would fit in with today's actors, because he just had this kind of, he's got this real vibe, again, a screen presence and charisma that just exudes from him just standing there looking at someone. So he can do the expressive stuff, but he can also do the serious stuff. And the same is for, I believe, Alfred Abel, who plays, I forget, is it Joe Frater? But he's the master of Metropolis, the father of Frater, and he's another one who gives a really good performance. Like, he's really good at subtlety, not overdoing it too much. And those two characters, I'll just call him the Master of Metropolis and Rotwang, they are very involved together as characters. They both love the same woman, and so they have quite a few scenes together. And I just love the contrast between their scenes together, where it's very quiet but very well acted, and then you have Maria and Freda, and it's very theatrical. It's just it really complements each other, especially when those four characters all start to blend together as the film leads to its final conclusion. But yeah, I mean, there's so much I could talk about, and I could just waffle on and on and on, but seeing this film again and really listening to the score, you know, played loud, was just incredible. But yeah, there's certainly points where you kind of like, you know, if I had a watch, I might check it, but really, it's such an engaging film for how long it really is. And there's just these images that just are some of the best things that have ever been put to camera, I think. The shot of the kind of the skeleton who's representing the Grim Reaper, when he brings up his kind of scythe and just starts slashing it towards the camera. There's I don't know, there's something about that shot that almost feels like it's coming out of the screen at me. It's such a powerful image. And then special effects are great. And, you know, some of it, like the miniature stuff, it doesn't, you know, it looks a little bit cheesy here and there and things like that. There's certainly flaws that can be found in this film, and again, the themes are very overt and, you know, blunt, but I don't know, there's something very powerful about it at the same time, and just jaw-dropping. You know, the sequence when Maria gets turned into, her likeness gets turned into the machine man, and all the rings are kind of going around her, the electricity. I mean, it just, the layers of the effects and how precise they are compared to similar effects I'd seen in earlier silent films that aren't quite refined as that, is just endlessly impressive. And I think it's an epic, it's an incredible film, and one that I love revisiting. And again, going to a cinema, you have to sit down and watch the full 2.5 hours. There's no kind of pausing it. And I like that. I like that I get forced to sit down and watch it. It was really a great experience, and just enamored me even more to this great film. In fact, I wore my Metropolis t-shirt, which I probably should have worn for this video, but it is what it is. So yeah, you know, I've reviewed this film, I've talked about it a lot, so I'm not going to go into too much, but influential, and for its time, unbelievable, and I think even for our time, it's fairly unbelievable. Yeah, love the film, really do love the film, and Fritz Lang's movies in general. He was really one of the masters of the silent era, I think. The next film they're going to be screening as part of their Silent Sundays program is going to be Sunrise, A Song of Two Humans, which is... I'll talk about that when I talk about it. That's one I can't miss. So, but I hope to attend every one of them that they do, because it's just it's reinvigorating my love of silent films. Now, the announcement I teased earlier, I'm going to be starting a podcast at some point this year, hopefully sooner rather than later. It's going to be called the 100 Years Ago Podcast. And it's essentially going to be me looking at films from 100 years ago. Pretty self-explanatory from the title, but for this year, I'm going to be looking at films from 1920. And, you know, just, it's not going to be too kind of, I'm not going to, like, you know, try and be more than I am with them. I'm no film critic, but I want to talk about some of these films and watch more of these films and go to more obscure areas than just the big hitters. Like, for 1920, it would certainly be, like, Buster Keaton's films, and also The Golem is one I'm probably going to get to, and then Dr. Caligari, and really look deep into some of those ones that don't get as much attention. Maybe rightfully so, but we'll find out, and it'll be very conversational and casual, much like my videos, I suppose. But I'm really looking forward to that. I think that's going to really spur me on to get more into silent films and try and fit it in amongst all my other film watching habits, which, yeah, but it feels appropriate. The 1920s are now 100 years ago, so as we enter the 2020s, I'd like to kind of go back and look at that incredible decade of film very slowly and methodically, for the next 10 years. You know, I certainly don't see any reason why I wouldn't want to keep doing it. So for 2020, I'm going to be looking at 1920 released films and talking about them in podcast form. I could do it as a video series on YouTube, but I think with the podcast, it'd be easier for me to do, and I could have guests on and things like that. So I'm looking forward to that, and I'll let you know when that's about to come out. I have no idea how I'm going to really work around it, because I've never done like a proper podcast that's released legit and all that kind of thing. So I'll look into hosting and all that kind of technical stuff, and then let you know in due course. But there we go, Metropolis. Awesome film. If you want more of a review of it, I've done, I think, a pretty damn good review of it a few years ago. I'll leave a link to that at the end of this video. This has been Silent Sundays. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
It's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans and calling into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you.